Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from the e-edition of today's Cape Cod Times, dated May 12th of 2025, a Monday. We'll start with the weather, as we always do, and across the Cape and Islands today, mostly breezy, sunny, very breezy in the afternoon with a high of 62 and a low of 53 in the overnight. A very pleasant day ahead of us. Turning out cloudy on Tuesday, high of 65, low of 51. And Wednesday, breezy with some sun and showers in the overnight, high of 64, low of 54. Those are temps that'll be pretty standard throughout the week. Thursday, low clouds, possibly some rain in the morning, high of 65, low of 56. Friday, same thing. Low clouds, high of 69, low of 58. So we have a nice week ahead of us, maybe a little overnight rain on Thursday in the morning, but basically a very, very nice day. Today the sun will rise at 5:25 a.m. It'll set at 7:51 p.m. We'll have 14 hours and 26 minutes of daylight. Now, heading to the front of the paper where the news, of course, and the lottery results are kept. And we read these lottery results because, well, somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030. And we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org and click on the Listen tab. We have a fully disability compliant website. Click on that Listen tab. You can catch up on a week's worth of readings, anything that you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there in perpetuity for your entertainment, and our grocery guides are up there so you might know what's on sale at the supermarket. All of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. For the latest lottery results, we go to the masslottery.com website because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early, and if you ask for it, you deserve the latest results. So, for the numbers game of Sunday, May 11th, in the midday drawing, the numbers were 2, 1, 8, 0. Again, yesterday's midday drawing results in the numbers game, 2, 1, 8, 0. In the evening drawing last night of the numbers game, the results were 5, 0, 2, 3. Again, last night's evening drawing of the numbers game, 5, 0, 2, 3. Mass cash results for Sunday, May 11th, 16, 21, 22, 26, and 29. And Lucky for Life rounds out our results for Sunday, May 11th from the lottery with 16, 26, 30, 34, and 43, with 6, the bonus number. Good luck to all who play, and remember us if you win. From the cover of today's Cape Cod Times, dated May 12th, the headline reads, Woods Hole researchers discuss finding RMS Titanic and share later images. And there's a photo with a caption that says, an image taken sometime after the 1985 discovery of the sunken RMS Titanic by a joint Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and French exploration shows rusticles formed when iron-loving bacteria like Halomonas titanicae corrode iron in submerged structures. And there's a photo of the bow, it looks like, of the Titanic, and there's lots of rusty stuff on it. This is reported by Gwen Friss of the Cape Cod Times. Thanks to LED lighting and digital cameras, sea life swimming around some of the world's sunken ships, including the RMS Titanic, is so bright and clear that it feels like peeking into an aquarium instead of the ocean's depths. More than 2,200 people signed up for a WHOI Ocean Encounters lecture May 7th on how undersea imaging is improved since researchers spotted the wreck of the RMS Titanic on September 1st of 1985. This event was one of the more popular ones, the reason likely being that Titanic continues to fascinate even 40 years after the discovery. And having speakers that were part of that mission was very compelling for the audience, said Suzanne Pellisson, Director of Public Relations for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, or WHOI. Stuart Harris, now retired chief designer for the Argos sled that carried the cameras that allowed a WHOI French exploration to find the infamous Titanic after decades of searching, was a panelist. Harris and 6 colleagues spotted the Titanic's boilers at about 1 a.m. Also on the panel were Dwight Coleman, ocean exploration and imaging technologist at WHOI, who talked about technical improvements like the ability of computers to project 2- or even 3-dimensional images by filling in missing pieces, and Victoria Preston, field roboticist at Olin College of Engineering and WHOI, who discussed getting ROVs, which stands for remotely operated vehicles, to the right place with the sensors needed to collect the desired data. If you missed the lecture, arranged to mark the 40th anniversary of the discovery of the Titanic, you can watch for free on YouTube or Facebook. Be sure to watch until the end of the hour-long program, where you'll find a surprise. WHOI plays a 5-minute video recording taken in the control room where 7 researchers and support staff were excitedly realizing they had found the sunken Titanic. Touted as unsinkable, the RMS Titanic was 4 days into her maiden voyage from England to New York when the ship struck an iceberg, split in 2, and sank. Of those on board, about 700 were rescued, but 1,500 perished. The other local story on the cover of today's Cape Cod Times: Orleans voters will decide on $4.5 million to design a new fire station, by Zane Razak. Orleans residents will decide whether to approve spending $4.5 million to pay for design work for a new fire rescue station. The proposal will be before voters at town meeting on Monday, May 12th. That's today, at 6 p.m. at Nauset Middle School Gymnasium. The funding will pay to hire architects, an owner's project manager, and other related costs. After the design is complete, a proposal for a full construction will be presented to voters at a future town meeting. Town officials say the current 1987-built building is too small, it's outdated, and it doesn't meet safety standards, operational demands, or space requirements for fire rescue services. Fire Chief Jeff Deering named air quality, lack of appropriate male and female spaces, inadequate space for equipment and personnel, and no training space among the deficiencies with the current station during a recent select board meeting. He showed a series of photos to showcase the building's problems, including the station's first aid room, which doubles as the public lobby. About 200 people a year come into our fire station having medical emergencies, so when you walk in to get a permit, there could be a medical emergency happening in front of you. We don't have separate spaces for that, said Deering. The article is also subject to approval at the May 20th annual town election. Deering said that the design process will allow them to pinpoint the exact square footage of the new station, where the location should be on the site at 58 Eldridge Parkway, and the ability to determine the cost. Another article would fund the third phase of construction for the Lakes and Ponds Sewer Area project in the area of Crystal Lake, Pilgrim Lake, Lonnie's Pond, Aries Pond, and Namaquoit River. The goal is to efficiently meet our nitrogen and phosphorus removal requirements, said Richard J. Waldo, Public Works and Natural Resources Director, during a recent meeting. Nitrogen removal is based on TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load, which is the calculation of the maximum amount of pollutants allowed to enter a water body, Waldo said. The town believes the Phase 3 project will be found to qualify for 0% interest rate loans as the first 2 phases were. The project is also eligible for financial help up to 25% from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. The article will also need to pass during the annual town election on May 20th. Voters will also vote on whether to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer $5 million to fund the design and construction of municipally owned solar projects at the wastewater treatment facility on Overland Way, the water treatment facility off Route 28, and the Department of Public Works facility on Godiah Hill Road. There is a photo, a large photo, on the cover of today's Cape Cod Times, and there's a gentleman looking into a small, it looks like almost an ant farm type of device, which is clear with a frame, and there are two fish in it, and the cut line reads, Center for Coastal Studies Marine Fisheries Research Director Owen Nichols holds an observation tank. That's what it is. That's the name for it. On May 9th, with a 3-spined stickleback and a silver side, collected at Millway Beach in Barnstable. It's part of a study of Barnstable Harbor with Friends of Barnstable Harbor and advanced marine biology students from Barnstable High School. And moving inside the paper as we keep it local, Sandwich election results. Who will replace Michael Miller? By Rachel Devaney. In Sandwich's town elections that were held May 8th, school committee incumbent Danielle Binyenda won by a landslide, while a new select board member nabbed a seat by just a few votes. Binyenda scooped up 1,141 votes, defeating Alexandra Higgins, who pulled in 669 votes, and Megan Tamaro, who received 455 for the 3-year seat, based on preliminary results that were provided by Town Clerk Taylor White. The committee has 7 seats. With 657 votes, David Sampson was elected to fill a 1-year unexpired term on the select board. The runner-up was Jean Perini, who received 641 votes, so only 16 votes difference, and third-place finisher David Edwin Newman got 328 votes. The seat opened with the death in November of Select Board member Michael Miller. With the re-election of incumbents Robert Patrick Ellis and Charles M. Holden to 3-year terms, the board is back up to its full complement of 5 members. The 2025 Sandwich town election was held on Thursday. The town, according to 2024 statistics, has roughly 17,581 registered voters and 6 precincts, according to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office. Ballot question 1 showed a difference of opinion with votes almost split down the middle. Ballot question 2 was approved with a resounding affirmative vote. For the majority of the 20 years Binyenda, who's 49, has lived in East Sandwich, she's been involved in groups dedicated to students. This is who is Danielle Binyenda. Binyenda of East Sandwich has served 1 term on the school committee, but is also chair of the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee. And she formerly served on the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, also the Parent Teachers Association, the Parent Teacher Student Association, and the Commission on Disability. Binyenda is also a dental hygienist. During her campaign, Binyenda said she was interested in heightening student response programs like REACH and the new Career Pathways program at Sandwich High School. The programs, she said, equip students for their future careers. Binyenda, in an interview with The Times, also said she hopes to address student retention, oversight, and improvement of district facilities, as well as school safety. And who is David Sampson? Sampson, who's 47 years old, of Forestdale, has lived in Sandwich for the majority of his life. He told that to The Times in a prior interview. He also served on the Board of Selectmen from 2016 to 2022, and he works in technology services. He currently serves on the Rotary Club of Bourne Sandwich, is a Sandwich Community Television board member, and is vice chairman of the Sandwich Chamber of Commerce. Throughout Sampson's Select Board campaign, he said he was concerned with the rate of taxes town residents are currently paying, and said he was also focused on wastewater infrastructure and mitigation. Sampson is also ready to invest in the public school district, he said. The schools, he said, haven't sustained the same level of maintenance that the town has, he said. No surcharge amendment for Sandwich, while ballot question number 2 sails through. On a tally of 811 to 740, voters rejected ballot question 1 to increase the surcharge to generate money for the town's special municipal water infrastructure investment fund. That money can be spent on maintenance, improvements, and investments to municipal drinking wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure costs. The money is raised through a surcharge on the annual property tax that's assessed on real property. The surcharge originally accepted by the town is 2%. The amendment would have increased the surcharge to 3%. Voters also considered a non-binding public advisory ballot question related to Holtec, owner of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station in Plymouth. Residents voted yes with 1,366 votes to call on Governor Healey and other officials to stop Holtec from releasing gaseous discharge of the radioactively and chemically contaminated industrial wastewater at Pilgrim. According to the ballot question, releasing the gaseous discharge violates the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. Keeping it local, we'll move to the Cape and Islands section. Interested in helping dogs that served by Gwen Friss. People from law enforcement or the military retire with benefits. But what happens to their four-legged colleagues? Locally, the nonprofit Cape Cod and Islands Police Canine Relief Fund pays veterinarian bills for a baker's dozen of dogs who have retired and mostly are living with their human handlers. Joe Ambrosini, a canine officer with the Barnstable County Sheriff's Department for a dozen years, founded the Relief Fund in 2023. Statewide, law enforcement and military dogs that are diagnosed with PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, can live out their lives at the Canine PTSD Research Center in Seekonk. Founder James Lamont and volunteers use behavioral therapy to ease the anxiety of dogs who have been shot, stabbed, injured in explosions, car accidents, or other on-the-job encounters. We make sure they don't encounter triggers that set them off, said Lamonti, noting that the sound of gunshots and the sight of uniforms are triggers for many of the dogs, there are 10 right now, at the Canine Retirement Center, which was founded in 2019. Ambrosini and Lamonti are among dozens of people working to pass a Massachusetts state law proposed by former Yarmouth Deputy Police Chief and current State Representative Stephen Zarhos in 2023, dubbed Dakota's Law. It would establish a state fund to pay for medical treatment for retired law enforcement dogs, to increase the charge from a misdemeanor to a felony if someone hurts a police dog, and to provide a Bill of Rights for working canines. Euthanasia is not going to be the first option for a dog who can no longer work, Lamonti said. For now, groups like the Cape Cod and Islands Police Canine Relief Fund and the Canine PTSD Center depend on donations. A fundraiser is being held at 6:30 on May 16th in the Dennis Yarmouth Regional High School auditorium to support the two organizations. The event at night includes a screening of Healing Dakota, the story of Lamonti's work with Dakota, a police dog injured while working on apprehending the Boston Marathon bombers in 2013. After the movie, Cat Wilson will MC a panel including Ambrosini, Lamonti, Zarhos, Sergeant Troy Perry, Patrick Martin, Nick Ambrosini with Canine Gage, and Peter McClelland. Tickets at $25 are available at the door or online, and again, it's a fundraiser. On May 18th, the first Canine Sergeant Sean Gannon Canine Handler of the Year Award will be presented to Canine Officer David Aguiar of the Rehoboth Police Department during a 10:30 a.m. ceremony at Skipper's Chowder House in South Yarmouth. The award is given in honor of Gannon, a Yarmouth police officer who was shot and killed in 2018 while serving a warrant. Gannon's canine partner, Nero, was injured but survived, with his experience being the catalyst for Nero's Law, which allows ambulances to transport canine officers to the nearest emergency help center. Also from the Cape and Islands, Massachusetts unemployment claims have dropped. Initial filings for unemployment benefits in Massachusetts dropped in most data compared with the week prior, the U.S. Department of Labor said on Thursday. New jobless claims, which is a proxy for layoffs, fell to 4,187 in the week ending May 3rd. That's down from 8,179 the week before, the Labor Department said. U.S. unemployment claims dropped to 228,000 last week. That's down 13,000 claims from the 241,000 the week prior on a seasonally adjusted basis. Michigan saw the largest percentage increase in weekly claims, with claims jumping by 128.3%. Delaware, meanwhile, saw the largest percentage drop in new claims, with claims dropping by 61.7%. And there's an editorial note. The USA Today Network is publishing localized versions of the story on its news sites across the country, generated with data from the U.S. Department of Labor's weekly unemployment insurance claims report. Our news automation and AI team would love to hear from you. The next headline in the Cape and Islands, the final headline, is the photo shoot section by Steve Heslip, raising the batting average on hummingbird photos. And there is a photo of a ruby-throated hummingbird putting on the brakes as it comes in for a soft landing, ready to fuel up at a feeder in Barnstable on May 6th. And it was a picture taken by Steve Heslip. Failure is not an option is the quote attributed to NASA Flight Director Gene Kranz during the Apollo 13 mission. Great goal to have, but then statistics meet reality. A Major League Baseball player is considered above average with a batting average of 300, meaning a hit 30% of the time he heads to the batter's box. The league-wide average is 250, meaning a 1 in 4 chance of hitting the ball. Technology's raised the success rates in just about every aspect of life. A few taps on the cell phone, and just about anything in the world can arrive almost 100% of the time on your doorstep in a matter of days. Photo failures are almost non-existent today. Sure, you can still pose a portrait with a telephone pole sticking out from someone's head, but it will be a properly focused and exposed image, instantly appearing on your screen for a reshoot. When the act of photo composition fails, fear not, more software to the rescue. The latest update to Adobe's Photoshop announces automatic distraction removal with the removal tool. It is a bandage-shaped icon on the toolbar. I watched the training video but couldn't bring myself to try it out. In baseball terms, a photograph can be a hit, miss, or sometimes simply a walk. Ansel Adams said 12 significant photographs in any one year is a good crop. The goal is always to make something great. But if the photo is a failure, go big. Pull out all the stops. My annual attempts at making the world's best hummingbird photo started in earnest last week. The goal was to raise my batting average with these tiny birds that move at ballistic speeds. The stage was set up around a feeder with a photo position about 10 feet away, a long lens, camera on tripod for stability, and a flash set up about 45 degrees off the camera angle at the right. I sat for about 2 hours. Birds were arriving about every 15 minutes. I had 7 chances. It produced 18 photos. Most were slightly out of focus. The one that's published above just made the cut from a complete fail to an almost there. My hummingbird batting average starting the new season is below 100, but the season is young and I've got nowhere to go but up. And that picture of the hummingbird landing to drink from the feeder is blurry because the wings are moving so fast, so it's a blur, which is what he's talking about. On the next page, there is a photo called At the Bourne Rotary, and there are several, protesters, I'm not sure, demonstrators, probably a better term, who have different signs and flags, things like that. And the caption reads, "A Born Free, Born Strong Protest for Justice rally was held May 8th at the Bourne Rotary, south of the Bourne Bridge, and it was sponsored by Indivisible Upper Cape. About 32 people were at the rally. The group's part of a national effort to resist the return of the Trump administration and to build a stronger, broader movement for justice, democracy, and human dignity, according to their press release." And keeping it local, we'll move to local sports and the high school roundup by Adam Kirkchin. Dennis Yarmouth girls shine at MSTCA meet. The Dennis Yarmouth girls outdoor track and field athletes had a stellar afternoon at the MSTCA Coaches Invitational at Braintree High. Dolphins senior standout Brianna Bram was named the outstanding runner of the meet. She won the 200 meter in 23.95 seconds. That's good for number 1 in the state and number 91 in the nation. She broke the meet record that was set in 1987 of 24.0, as well as Bram's own school record. Bram placed second in the 100 meter in 11.9, a DY record, and number 2 in the state. Bram, and her name is spelled Braham, along with Tiana Jacques, Carrie Clark, and Kirsten Taloma, placed 4th in the 4x100 meter in 51.65. In the 400-meter hurdles, 8th grader Leah Kogan had a personal best 76.92, placing 27th. Freshman Carrie Clark won the 400-meter in 58.89, which is number 3 in the state. Senior Olivia Pendleton placed 13th in the mile with a personal best of 5:34.75. In the triple jump, Taloma placed 12th with a jump of 33.2. Jacques placed 14th in the triple jump with a personal best of 32.9. And in the javelin, senior Vivian Castano placed 7th with a season best throw of 94.7. Also in high school sports action in boys lacrosse, it was Nauset 12, Milton 4. The Warriors, who are 10-4, won their 5th straight. Nantucket 4, Shrewsbury 3. The Whalers, who are 8-3, won their 2nd in the last 3 games. Moses Brown 15, Martha's Vineyard 1. The Vineyarders, who were 5-9, lost for the 5th consecutive time. Barnstable 16, Dennis Yarmouth 4. The Redhawks, who were 7-6, beat the Dolphins, who were 6-6, to end a 2-game losing streak. And in girls lacrosse, it was Falmouth 10, Nantucket 9. The Clippers, who were 8-6, edged the Whalers, who were 7-4, for their 4th straight win. North Reading 9, Martha's Vineyard 4. The Vineyarders, who were 5-6, lost for the 5th time in the last 6 games. In baseball, it was Falmouth 9, Barnstable 0. The Clippers, who are 10-4, beat the Redhawks 3-11 for their 5th win in the last 6 tries. In softball, it was Boston Latin Academy 24, Martha's Vineyard 4. The Vineyarders, who are 2-9, lost for the 3rd straight time. In boys tennis, it was Martha's Vineyard 5, Nantucket 0. The Vineyarders, 12-0, beat the Whalers 4-8 to continue their unbeaten season. In girls tennis, it was Martha's Vineyard 4, Nantucket 1 in match 1. The Vineyarders, who were 11-0, topped the Whalers 5-4 to stay unbeaten. And in match 2, Martha's Vineyard 4, Nantucket 1. The Vineyarders, 12-0, beat the Whalers 5-5 in the second match of the day. And we are almost at the midway point in our reading, and regular listeners are aware it's at that stage that we normally move to the obituaries, a different kind of local news that we stick with and do at the half hour. But there are no obituaries in today's Cape Cod Times of Monday, May 12th. It's probably because they're usually published in the Sunday paper of the Cape Cod Times, and that kind of completes the week. That's almost like the end of the week. So there are no obituaries. We will move on to national and international news because we've completed all the local news. Lawmakers draw hard lines on bill. Competing Republican demands could derail Trump's mega package, by Riley Beggin of USA Today in Washington. In early April, House Speaker Mike Johnson huddled with a handful of conservative hardliners as the fate of President Donald Trump's most important second-term bill hung in the balance. The Republican lawmakers were worried the mega package to overhaul government spending and cut taxes would balloon the federal deficit. Johnson needed their votes in order to kick off negotiations and eventually deliver for the new president. So Johnson made the deficit hawks a promise. The Louisiana Republican would ensure there would be at least $1.5 trillion in spending cuts over 10 years in the package, or they could kick him out of the speakership. Fulfilling that promise will be no simple feat, as lawmakers draw hard lines over what they will support in the massive bill. It's becoming increasingly clear that not every player's ultimatums will be met. The question is who will be forced to compromise. Each group has outsized influence because of Republicans' narrow majorities in both chambers. As few as 4 lawmakers rebelling in the House or Senate could derail the final package, as no Democrats are expected to support the legislation. Republican leaders say failure is not an option. If they don't pass something by the end of the year, Trump's 2017 tax cuts will expire, and renewing them is a major priority for the president. There's an additional incentive to get it done, as the bill would raise the debt ceiling and avoid default without requiring negotiations with Democrats, another top goal for the party. Tax cuts will be the heart of the Republicans' package. Trump wants to make his 2017 tax cuts permanent, which would cost an estimated $4.5 trillion over the next 10 years. The president has also said it's a priority to eliminate taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits, all of which he touted on the campaign trail. Following through on these would cost at least another $900 billion, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. GOP leaders say that extending the 2017 tax cuts will generate $2.5 trillion in growth. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation expects it will be closer to $710 billion. And more than 30 Republicans have said they won't support the full suite of tax priorities unless they can cut at least $2 trillion to make it deficit neutral by Republicans' own estimates. That's a big task. For context, the federal government is estimated to spend around $7 trillion total in fiscal year 2025. Nearly every significant piece of that pie, such as Medicare, Social Security, and defense, would be politically sensitive to cut. At the moment, it seems leadership intends to keep the promise of cutting as much as they spend. Johnson told House Republicans on May 8th that they should build a smaller $4 trillion tax package in order to meet the goal of $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. Trump has also endorsed raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans as a way to pay for other priorities, an unpopular proposal among most congressional Republicans. Medicaid's in the crosshairs. House Republicans have designated the lion's share of spending cuts to the Energy and Commerce Committee, which oversees Medicaid and CHIP, and has been instructed to cut $880 billion. Because Trump has repeatedly said Medicare's off the table for cuts, it's expected that most of that would have to come from Medicaid, which provides coverage to more than 70 million low-income Americans. Lawmakers are seeking ways to meet that colossal figure without reducing benefits for eligible recipients. Some tweaks are easy for most Republicans to support: implementing work requirements, cracking down on non-citizens enrolled, and regular eligibility reviews. But the savings from those changes would be modest. Most of the solutions that would be needed to close the gap are no-goes for a group of moderate Republicans, such as a change to the federal match rate to states, or per capita caps on Medicaid funding, because they would likely trigger reductions in Medicaid spending by states. Johnson said recently that the change to the federal match rate is off the table. A dozen House Republicans have said they cannot accept cuts to vulnerable populations, and Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska has said he won't stomach more than $500 billion in cuts to the program. At least 5 Republican senators have also raised concerns. A SALT showdown. When Republicans approved the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017 during Trump's first term, they set a cap on federal deductions for state and local taxes paid, which was known as SALT. that largely benefit people who live in higher tax states. Making some residents of those mostly Democratic states pay more in taxes helped reduce the cost of Trump's signature tax law. Now, a small group of Republicans who represent districts in those states, primarily New York, California, and New Jersey, want those caps lifted, and there are enough of them to kill the reconciliation bill if they don't get what they want. However, it is unclear how much they want the cap to be raised. Representative Young Kim, a Republican from California, has proposed a $62,000 cap, as opposed to the current $10,000 one. Representative Mike Lawler, a Republican from New York, introduced a bill to raise the cap to $100,000 for single filers and $200,000 for married couples. Some, such as Representative Nicole Maliotakis, a Republican from New York, have proposed income-based caps. Representative Nick LaLota, a Republican from New York, said that the core group of 5 members have discussed privately what they're willing to accept, but they won't release it publicly yet. All 3 of these factions will be under immense pressure from their leadership and from Trump to compromise and approve the package, even if they don't get what they want. Congressional leaders in the White House both want to have the bill to the president's desk by July 4th. Editorial note that contributing to that report was Zach Anderson of USA Today. Our next headline, Consumer Watchdog to Scrap Financial Oversight Policies by Douglas Gillison of Reuters. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a list on May 9th of nearly 70 policy and regulatory guidance documents stretching back more than a decade that the agency plans to rescind. The announcement, which was not final, was the latest step in the administration's radical reorientation of the CFPB's work under President Donald Trump. The agency, which was created after the 2008 financial crisis to serve as a watchdog for American consumers against predatory business practices, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The documents rescinded provided policy and guidance oversight on matters as varied as debt collections in nursing homes, supervision of companies offering financial services to military service members, discrimination in lending based on gender and sexual orientation, and the publication of consumer complaint data. Some were policies and guidance issued under the prior Trump administration. In a notice posted May 9th to the Federal Register's website, acting CFPB Director Russell Vought said that the policy documents, which offer interpretations of existing law and announce bureau priorities, sometimes imposed illegal requirements on companies or simply increased the regulatory burden unnecessarily. Even where guidance documents were not necessarily improper, it's the Bureau's current policy to avoid issuing guidance except where necessary and where compliance burdens would be reduced rather than increased, Vought said. Republicans have long charged that the CFPB used such policy documents to avoid issuing regulations subject to public comment and legal challenges. The decision to scrap them is not yet final, but the Bureau will not enforce them during a pending review, according to Vought. In a statement, Brady Williams, legal counsel at Better Markets, which advocates for tougher financial oversight, said the CFPB's move implied it could dismantle its public-facing consumer complaint database. This is not just bureaucratic housekeeping. This is a calculated demolition of the tools consumers and advocates rely on to protect themselves from financial abuse, Williams said. Rob Nichols, head of the American Bankers Association, an industry lobby, hailed the move, saying in a statement he hoped it marked a turning point for the CFPB's approach to regulation. Before Trump fired former CFPB Director Rohit Chopra in February, the agency released a compendium of its guidance documents, noting that under a Supreme Court decision in 2024, courts and not federal agencies will have the final say in how arcane regulatory laws must be interpreted. Some people in the news from USA Today and Reuters. A$AP Rocky drops hints about the name of his third baby with Rihanna. Following Rihanna's fashionable surprise pregnancy reveal at the Met Gala, A$AP Rocky gave a hint about the name selection for their third baby. Rocky made an appearance on Late Night with Seth Meyers with Vogue editor-in-chief Anna Wintour to recap the upper echelon event and discuss some of the best ensembles of the night. Along with Coleman Domingo, Pharrell Williams, and Lewis Hamilton, Rocky was among the esteemed co-chairs of the ball with the superfine tailoring black style theme. During the sit-down, Meyers congratulated the Tony Tone rapper on the baby and asked if the newest addition would be named in the same vein as his other kids with the beauty mogul. Your first two kids have R names. Obviously, you and Rihanna have R names. Is it a lock that the third will have an R name, do you think? Meyers asked. For sure, Rocky responded. Nation and World briefs from USA Today Network and Reuters. The FAA. Newark plane traffic briefly slowed due to telecoms issue. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, was forced to briefly slow arriving and departing planes at New Jersey's Newark Liberty Airport on May 11th because of a new telecommunications issue, the agency said. The Philadelphia Terminal Radar Approach Control suffered a new problem that briefly led the FAA to issue a ground stop while it ensured redundancies were working as designed. The FAA said operations have returned to normal. On May 9th, the Philadelphia facility suffered a 90-second radar and telecommunications outage, which was the second in 2 weeks after a serious outage on April 28th. And Tufts student returns to Massachusetts after release from immigration custody in Boston. A Tufts University student from Turkey who was swept up in the campaign by President Donald Trump's administration to deport pro-Palestinian campus activists returned to Massachusetts on May 10th after spending more than 6 weeks in an immigration detention center in Louisiana. Rumeza Ozturk, who was arrested after co-writing an opinion piece criticizing her school's response to Israel's war in Gaza, told reporters after arriving at Logan International Airport in Boston that she was excited to get back to her studies and community after a judge ordered her immediately released on May 9th. Our next headline in the Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, May 12th. Budget cuts could wreak climate havoc. Democrats say they'll work against some reductions, by Dinah Voiles-Pulver of USA Today. Coming up with a final federal budget always involves arm twisting and other negotiating tactics as everyone lobbies for their priorities, so the initial budget proposal released by the White House in early May remains far from final. However, pick any topic related to conservation, environmental protection, climate change, or weather, and it's not hard to find someone concerned by the cuts the Trump administration is proposing in its quest to shrink the federal budget. In total, President Donald Trump's proposed budget recommends chopping more than $32 billion across agencies charged with monitoring weather, oceans, and the atmosphere, and with protecting natural and historic resources, parks, and conservation lands, according to a USA Today analysis. The cuts echo an array of actions already taken by federal agencies and the President's Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE. Democrats, former federal scientists, and advocacy groups say the cuts will set back the nation's efforts to combat climate change, that they'll leave the country's environmental satellite programs lagging other nations, and allow increases in pollution and harmful emissions. The president's supporters say such cuts have to happen if the nation is ever going to pay down its debt. The president's budget does include a lot of cuts to offices that look at renewables and social and environmental justice, said Diana Furchtgott-Roth, director at the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation. That's a conservative think tank that drafted Project 2025. We have a $36 trillion national debt, and we have a $2 trillion deficit. We shouldn't be spending money on these things. But a wide range of conservation and environmental advocates argue that the president's budget could have devastating impacts for years to come, and that there are better ways to cut federal spending. Ranking Democrats in the House and Senate vowed to work against some of the budget reductions. Trump's budget, which was bought and paid for by his fossil fuel megadonors, would be an unmitigated disaster for everyone except the looters and polluters, said Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, the top Democrat on the Environment and Public Works Committee, in a news release. With the cuts to the EPA budget, the most hazardous industries would get to spew cancer-causing pollution and greenhouse gases into our air, exacerbating climateflation and everything from insurance to groceries. Here are some examples of key cuts. In the Department of the Interior, at the Interior Department, which includes the National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and Geological Survey, the budget would drop from $17 billion to $12 billion in 2026, even though it's slated to now take on services provided by other agencies. National parks advocacy groups were quick to raise concerns about the more than $1 billion cut to the parks budget, which is a 25% reduction. The budget also included a proposal to shed many of the smaller, less visited 433 parks by handing them over to states to manage. At the U.S. Geological Survey, $564 million would be eliminated for university grants and programs that focus on quote-unquote social agendas, such as climate change, rather than achieving dominance in energy and critical minerals, according to the budget document. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's office that oversees protected marine species, such as whales and sea turtles, would be merged with an office performing similar functions for land and freshwater species at the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is slated for a $37 million cut. The administration's budget also announced plans to create a new federal wildland fire service in the Interior Department. Wildfire mitigation and firefighting responsibilities at the U.S. Forest Service, which has been under the Department of Agriculture for 120 years, would be merged with similar responsibilities at 4 agencies in the Interior Department. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. The Environmental Protection Agency's budget would shrink from $9.1 billion to $4.2 billion. The cuts would end $1 billion in grant funding to states. Almost $500 million would be eliminating or reducing 3 grant programs that the administration describes as radical environmental justice work, woke climate research, and skewed, overly precautionary modeling that influences regulations. 2 additions are noted across these environmental areas. $9 million would be added to a budget of more than $100 million for the drinking water program, and $27 million to a grant program for indigenous tribes to maintain water and wastewater infrastructure, increasing that program's budget several times over. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. A variety of climate-dominated research, data, and grant programs would be terminated at NOAA, reducing the budget by $1.3 billion. The cuts also include NOAA's climate adaptation partnerships. The proposal would scale back the planned replacement for NOAA's existing geostationary operational environmental satellites, including instruments for monitoring the atmosphere and ocean. The system provides a host of public data for weather observation and modeling, as well as other kinds of Earth, atmospheric, and solar data. The Trump proposal would also cancel unspecified contracts for what the administration termed unnecessary climate measurements. At the Department of Energy, although the so-called Green New Deal was never passed by Congress, the president's budget makes several references to the Green New Scam in its proposal to shave money from the Energy Department's budget. It proposes canceling more than $15 billion in funds allocated from the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law for renewable energy sources. More than $2.5 billion would be cut from the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which oversees the department's Energy Star program, blamed for unpopular regulation on gas stoves and light bulbs. It also cuts $389 million from the Environmental Management Program that oversees waste cleanup at 14 active cleanup sites. Other proposed spending cuts: the Department of Agriculture. The budget cuts more than $2 billion in environmental-related expenses, such as $754 million, for a program that provides technical assistance for property owners who want to conserve and maintain natural resources on their land. And NASA, the space agency, would see a 24.3% cut in its programs related to Earth science and climate change. That's a reduction from $24.8 billion to $18.8 billion. It would also eliminate $1.1 billion for low-priority climate monitoring satellites. Our next headline: University attacks may come with a cost. U.S. higher education and competitive edge long seen as intertwined, by Zachary Schmille in Washington. In 1957, a U.S. senator from Texas named Lyndon Johnson anxiously watched from his ranch as the Soviet Union became the first country to launch a satellite into orbit around the Earth. The angst from those days and the Eisenhower administration's early setback in the space race helped push Johnson to sign the Higher Education Act of 1965 when he became president. The landmark law flooded the higher education system with federal money and eventually lots of student loan debt, with the goal of training generations of new engineers. More than 70 years later, some Democrats are becoming increasingly anxious that another president might cause a different world power to bypass the United States. They fear Donald Trump's pressure campaign to restrict funding to American colleges, while trying to influence their programming and campus cultures, could cause the country to fall behind in key areas of research, from rocket science to biomedicine, as China pulls ahead. Despite Trump's public antagonizing of colleges, they're hoping their distinct concerns might resonate with a president who cares deeply about maintaining America's competitive edge. China is already trying to seize the moment and recruit some of the brightest talent, Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat from Washington, said at a recent congressional hearing. The United States is the world leader in medical research, but creating that was not an accident, and maintaining it is not inevitable. Since Trump regained the White House, his administration has revoked the visas of hundreds of international students. Federal agencies have refused to cover the costs of federally supported research projects. At prestigious universities like Harvard, research funding has been repeatedly frozen over concerns about anti-Semitism and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. College presidents have compared their stress since January 20th to the panic they faced at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. They too are worried the United States could fall behind China's research capabilities. A former president of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology warned in Foreign Affairs magazine that China could fill the void of a looming brain drain of scientific talent from the United States. Through its recent initiatives to cut federal funds for university research, the Trump administration risks draining a crucial source of new ideas for industry and the military, even as the geopolitical threats it faces continue to grow, L. Raphael Reif wrote on May 6th. Some Republicans who have been loath to disagree publicly with Trump in recent months seem to share these concerns. Senator Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, wrote in a co-authored Washington Post editorial in March that more federal investment should be made in scientific research, not less. Just as China's commitment to research and development has grown, the U.S. government's has waned, the article said. Just as we did when the Soviet Union drew ahead in the space race, the U.S. must meet the moment by accelerating strategic investments in scientific research and development of future technologies. Echoes of the space race. Throughout the early 20th century, Washington politicians were conflicted about increasing federal support for higher education. But after the launch of Sputnik, a logjam broke, said Josh Mitchell, the author of The Debt Trap: How Student Loans Became a National Catastrophe. LBJ was able to convince Congress that we needed to finance higher education from a national security standpoint, he said. The Soviets' ability to put the first human-made object into space had major implications for keeping the United States safe. It shocked millions of Americans, and it underlined the country's need to educate more smart scientists who could build weapons and invent new technologies faster than their counterparts in rival countries. In the ensuing decades, the federal government massively boosted funding for university research. At the same time, it propped up systems that encouraged students to take out loans to pay for college. As the cost of a college degree soared and a crisis over student debt came into view, politicians, Republicans in particular, became more skeptical about letting federal dollars flow to universities. As the Cold War faded, so did arguments like LBJ's that colleges played a key role in keeping the United States competitive and safe. The GOP, meanwhile, fractured over foreign policy issues, and it became increasingly frustrated over the perceived lack of conservative thinkers on campuses. The number of Democratic voters without college degrees started shrinking as the coronavirus pandemic ushered in a broader sense of skepticism among conservatives about the value of scientific research. In the last few years, campus unrest amid the Israel-Hamas war prompted Republicans, in the name of curbing anti-Semitism, to ramp up federal oversight of colleges. Now there's this huge antagonism between the leaders in Washington and higher education, Mitchell said. China is on our campuses recruiting. Maura Healey, the governor of Massachusetts, has risen as one of the most passionate voices to criticize Trump's recent funding cuts to college research. Healey, whose state is home to Harvard, a favorite punching bag for the president, was one of the first Democrats to portray Trump's pressure campaign against universities as a threat to national security and the economy. Donald Trump's misguided attacks on our universities and on research are benefiting China, she said on MSNBC on April 23rd. Massachusetts is among the 5 top states for international study, according to data from the Institute of International Education. Nearly a third of international students come from China, second only to India, a trend which mirrors the larger makeup of foreign students in the United States. The concept of students leaving to study elsewhere is no longer theoretical, Healey later said on CNN. China's on our campuses recruiting our scientists, she said. That makes America less safe, less competitive. It also has tremendous ripple effects for our economy. On April 16th, the Department of Homeland Security threatened to impede Harvard's ability to enroll students from abroad, an unprecedented move that would devastate the campus if the White House moved forward with it. Amid the uncertainty, the Ivy League school's undergraduate college allowed international students the option of accepting admissions offers for next fall at Harvard and another university in a different country where they'd been admitted. Leo Gerdane, an international student at Harvard from Sweden, said the anxiety among his peers is palpable. A lot of international students are definitely thinking twice about going to the U.S., he said. And with that troubling statement, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Monday, May 12th of 2025. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other. Remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.